Without doubt, almost everyone in the DevOps community knows the name John Allspaw. In fact, if there were a starting gun in the DevOps movement, it was certainly the famous talk at the Velocity Conference in 2009 when John Allspaw and Paul Hammond talked about doing 10 deploys a day at Flickr. I finally got to meet John Allspaw in person at the DevOps Days in Mountain View in 2010. It's a meeting I'll never forget, and over the years I've learned so much from him. He got his master's degree from Lund University back when he was the CTO of Etsy. His advisors included the famous Dr. Richard Cook and Dr. Sidney Dekker, famous for their contributions to the safety and resilience engineering community. He now works with both of them as partners at Adaptive Capacity Labs. He told me a couple of months ago just how much he's learned working with them, taking his colleagues' expertise to study incidents deeply, such as what Erica just shared. What dazzles me about John's work is that he believes that by understanding how organizations handle incidents, we get incredible clues on how organizations learn. I can't think of a better presentation to follow Erica's presentation than John Allspaw, who has contributed so much to the space. Please welcome John.
Before I start, I want to make a few things clear. So the first thing is that these are only a few of the most common patterns. And they're across organizations that we've come into contact with. That means both clients and non-clients. And the second is that these are not judgments or comments on any given single organization, a client or non-client. So I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. These are observations that seem to have some valid support. So here's the summary slide. Here's the bottom line up front. The first is the state of maturity in the industry on learning from incidents is low. Really low. I've been studying this for a number of years with my colleagues, and I can say that I think that we, for the most part, blanket generalization, in the industry think that this is a solved problem and that we're quite good at it. This is could not be further from the truth. I would say that a significant part, I'll go into later, that tech leadership in the industry fundamentally misunderstands what it means to effectively learn from incidents. Practitioners as well, but there's a gap there. The second is that this gap exists. There's a gap between how technology leaders and hands-on practitioners understand incidents, understand what they mean, and understand how to learn from them in a progressive and effective way. The third point is that learning from incidents, as you might guess at this point, is given low priority relative to all of the other things that businesses are doing. And this results in this really narrow focus on fixing rather than learning. And this has a number of follow-on cascade effects that tends to be, not good for business. And lastly, there's really an overconfidence in what these what we'll call shallow incident metrics mean. And there's a great deal of significant energy wasted on tabulating them and producing reports on them. These metrics are frequently gamed. They don't have any predictive value, about as useful as counting lines of code. When it comes to shallow incident metrics, we think we're doing astronomy, but we end up doing astrology instead. So let's talk about this gap. This gap between technology leaders and hands-on practitioners is one of the more prevalent. It's a bit concerning of these patterns. So what is actually learned versus what we think we learn? How learning actually takes place versus how we think learning is supposed to happen and all of the programs we might put in place to support that. And what the incident actually means for the business, not just what it means for right now, but what it means to inform anticipating future incidents and future vulnerabilities in the future. So I want to really make sure that I'm clear on this. I'd like to sort of describe, when I say technology leaders, I mean people who are at the upper echelons hierarchically in an organization, and hands-on practitioners who have their hands in the guts, of the technology. And the reason why I'm making this distinction between tech leaders and practitioners is to draw attention to something that I think is so fundamental that we often don't acknowledge it. In research in human factors and resilience engineering, technology leaders, that is to say, those in positions to provide resources and policies and compliance or rules, would be known as the blunt end. And this is in contrast to what was known as the sharp end, the people whose day-to-day work is about evolving and maintaining this technology. So here we have practitioners who are charged with the responsibility of designing and evolving this technology and organization, and leaders are charged with providing resources and policies that are supposed to at least support and enable practitioners to live up to that responsibility. But as you can see, they're quite distant. And when it comes to incidents, technology leaders tend much more often to look at summaries and simplifications or abstractions, certainly lots of statistics about incidents, very rarely what makes incidents difficult. So the people furthest away from the day-to-day details need to understand what it means to cope with the complexity at that sharp end, at least enough to support those hands-on folks effectively. Isn't that a funny thing? There's somewhat of a dilemma there. So when we talk about incidents and having a close understanding of what's going on, how all of the different parts interact and components and subsystems and behaviors,